For a moment I felt no shock and did not realize the cause of the uproar, but my wife, who was sitting nearer the wall, felt a tremor and, realizing that it was an earthquake, took one quick step to my side and clasped her arms over my head to shield me from the danger of falling masonry to which she herself thus remained exposed. The next instant, the whole house was rocking violently. A fissure opened horizontally near the top of the west wall facing me, and a shower of brickwork fell near the doorway. Had my wife hastened to the door on feeling the shock, she would probably have been struck down at the moment of emergence, as happened in so many cases that day. That is an account of the devastating 1907 Kingston earthquake written by Dr. Vaughan Cornish, a geologist with a keen interest in the forces that shape our planet, who just happened to be in Jamaica at that time. In this video, we'll explore both his personal experience of the terrifying day and how he broke down the science behind one of the most destructive earthquakes in Jamaican history. What exactly happened beneath Kingston on January 14, 1907, and why was the destruction so severe? Stick around to find out. Vaughan Cornish was born in England in 1862. He was a geoscientist with a particular interest in how different types of waves move through different parts of the earth. Things like atmospheric waves, ocean waves, and of course, in the context of what we're discussing here, seismic waves. He called this field climatology. He coined the term and even published an article about it in the Geographical Journal in 1899. I don't think climatology really caught on though, because today we recognize that waves moving through different media belong to different fields of study. The study of ocean waves falls under physical oceanography. Atmospheric waves fall under atmospheric physics, which is a subdiscipline of meteorology. And of course, earthquake waves fall under seismology, which itself falls within the realm of geophysics. There really isn't any reference to climatology as a field of study in the modern context. But anyway, that's not what we're focusing on. Today we're focusing on another publication, also by Cornish, which was also published in the Geographical Journal, this time in 1908, and I'll link it in the description for those of you who want to take a deeper dive. It was an account of the 1907 earthquake, both from the standpoint of his personal experience and through the lens of late 19th to early 20th century scientists interested in seismic waves. Now, for the uninitiated, I covered the 1907 earthquake in my Seismic Shorts YouTube series back in January. But to quickly summarize the event, it happened on Monday, January 14, 1907, and most sources estimate its magnitude to have been between 6.2 and 6.5, and pretty much every building in downtown Kingston was destroyed, first by the earthquake and then by a series of fires that burned for hours. The death toll was estimated to be anywhere from 800 to just over 1,000. Most reports come from personal accounts, but Cornish was a man on the ground, and him being in Jamaica to have experienced it was entirely by chance. He wrote, and I quote, "On Thursday, January 10, my wife and I arrived at Kingston on our way back from a visit to the Panama Canal and took up our quarters in the center of Kingston at 112 East Street. This hotel, the Grenville, which was built in the days of slavery, was very substantially constructed of brick, with solid walls 14 inches in thickness for their whole height of 2 floors, viz. A ground floor and a first floor." End quote. So it was just a short visit on their way back from Panama. They arrived in Kingston on the 10th, which was a Thursday. The earthquake struck on the 14th, which was a Monday, and Cornish said that he and his wife spent the next few days on the hotel lawn. Then on Thursday the 17th, they took a train from Kingston to Port Antonio, and he described the train as being crowded with the sick and wounded. A week later, they sailed for England via Philadelphia and New York. 4 months later, on May 4, Cornish set sail for Jamaica once again. On his return, the streets had mostly been cleared of debris and the tram cars were running, but other than that, he found a city that looked almost the same as it had been 4 months earlier when he left. The purpose of this second visit was a completely self-funded journey to assess the damage that had been done and to better understand the earthquake waves. And we'll discuss some of his findings in the next segment. A key observation that Cornish found somewhat surprising while assessing buildings of similar construction was that the eastern half of Kingston suffered much more damage than the western half of Kingston. In his paper, Cornish included a plan of Kingston, and even though this map is from almost 120 years ago, you can already recognize a few familiar places. For my Jamaican viewers, particularly those familiar with downtown Kingston, some landmarks really stand out. I can see Maypen Cemetery in the west. Further north, I can see Upard Camp. I can also see a place labeled Racecourse, which today is National Heroes Circle. What's also interesting to me is a place labeled Lunatic Asylum, which, based on its name and location near Windward Road, would today be the Bellevue Hospital. But anyway, let's not get carried away with the place names. If you look closely, you can make out plenty of other landmarks that still exist today. Cornish shaded the area that was destroyed by the fires following the earthquake. But more importantly, he showed a dividing line between the areas of greater and lesser damage. He labeled the corner of Harbour Street and Johns Lane as point A, and the corner of North Street and Wildman Street as point B, then connected the two with a line AB. To the east of the line, the damage was visibly greater than to the west. Cornish later visited Port Royal, Garden Town, Buff Bay, and Port Antonio. He noted that some of the tourists in Buff Bay, they were blocked by landslides that made the road impassable. He also documented that the damage in Port Royal was about the same as the less heavily damaged parts of Kingston. From a geological perspective, he observed that areas built on limestone foundation outside of Kingston suffered less damage than structures built on alluvial sediments. Today, this is well-established geological knowledge. Seismic waves are amplified in unconsolidated alluvial sediments, producing stronger ground shaking than when they are, when they travel through more competent limestone. Cornish also made reference to a tidal wave, what we would today call a tsunami, affecting Hope Bay, Orange Bay, Anato Bay, Ocho Rios, and St. Anne's Bay. He concluded that these waves were most likely generated by submarine landslides. It's impressive that with the limited scientific knowledge and technology at the time, that he was able to come up with this plausible explanation. But damage and destruction aside, I think what interested Cornish the most were the seismic waves, and that's exactly what we'll discuss in the next segment. Cornish proposed that the earthquake did not originate from a single focal point, but rather from two distinct source areas. He argued that the pattern of destruction, particularly the band of heavily damaged buildings crossing the island, could be explained by the overlapping effects of northern and a southern focus. From this, he breaks down the ground motion in Kingston into several distinct components. First, there was a rapid jarring vibration. This was widely reported by people on the ground and described as coming somewhat steeply from below. Cornish suggests that this vertical jolt, while very noticeable, likely played a limited role in actually overturning walls. Second, there were surface undulations, or what observers described as strong swell, literally a ground swell, moving across the ground with significant force. Cornish characterizes these as short, steep surface waves. Third, he introduced the idea of epifocal waves, drawing on previous work. These are the most visually striking surface undulations and behave differently from the typical elastic seismic waves. Cornish notes that they travel more slowly and have distinct mechanical characteristics. Instrumental records from the West India direct cable transmitter captured rapid oscillations of about 4 per second. Combining this with his field survey of collapsed structures, Cornish argued that these surface waves were the main cause of the wall failure, producing swaying and tilting rather than simple vertical collapse. He also observed that damage was not evenly distributed, with greater destruction in the eastern half of Kingston, while some earlier interpretations suggest purely transverse vibrations. Cornish ultimately concluded that the pattern of destruction along the aftershock observation supported a more complex wave field dominated by these surface wave effects. Now, coming out of his studies, Cornish made several suggestions at the end of the paper about what he thought would be the best approach in the event of an earthquake of this magnitude. First, he proposed that a team of 3 should be commissioned to the island: a field geologist, an expert in building construction, and a hydrographer. He also recommended that coastal areas be reassessed and that a complete record of all damage be carefully documented. Of course, Jamaica was, or has come a long way since then. We now have a robust seismic network across the island, as well as an earthquake unit, and to my knowledge there is geological input in many construction projects, not all of them, but many. We also have hydrogeologists and hydrologists working in government, including the Water Resources Authority, as well as in the private sector. But of course, there is still plenty of room for improvement and things are not perfect. Would it take another event of this magnitude for us to get our act together? Only time will tell. And if you made it this far, thanks for coming along on this journey as we take a walk back in time to an event that really changed the course of our history as Jamaicans. Looking back at events like these really helps us better understand the earthquake history of Jamaica beyond just the surface level documentation in conventional media. These accounts can inform our current practices and help us to know what to look for in the future. As always, thanks for watching and I'll see you in the next one. Take care.